and all went in. All went in there, but it's fine. You know, I like tomato sauce. You know, I can always save it after I cook it, so it's fine. It smells so good. So tomato. Well, of course it is. It's tomato, but you know what I mean. Oh, that's looking good. We have about 6 minutes on the timer. So, just say I do love cooking pasta. I love the way it looks. I love the way it tastes. I love the way it smells. Also, this pasta, it has little dents in it, the length. It just tastes so good. Yeah, I love carbohydrates. But no, it's so great. Also, my mum taught me that the way to know when pasta is done, fun way, is you fling it against a tile, and if it sticks, it's ready. And I always wondered why when we would have pasta when I was little, when I would walk into the kitchen and there'd be pasta on tiles, and I was thinking, what's happened? I don't know. But now I know it's that. That's why. Which explains a lot. Stir, pasta. Stir in the sauce. Sauce is looking good. Smelling good. Pasta's looking good. It's all done. It took 9 minutes. And here's the sauce. I'm just going to stir it in now. But it looks really good. Yeah, I'm happy with that. From the kinda to the original pan it was in. And now I'm just going to put on here. Just going to pour this in, okay? Like that. And we'll scrape it. Hang on a minute. Oh, hello. I don't know if you can see me a lot right now. There we go. But just wanna stir this in, fold it in, and just stir it in. I need a spoon instead of like a spatula, so spoon. All covered and mixed in with the sauce. Oh, it's so yummy! I'm so excited!
closer to home.
Parliament Square.
The Prime Minister pressed to lobby Donald Trump as George Floyd's family grieve, and the officer who killed him faces even more serious charges. Also tonight, Parliament and the pandemic. The Cabinet Minister self-isolating after he fell ill among MPs. The prisoner suspected over the disappearance of Madeleine McCann as police appeal for information. No turning back on the people of Hong Kong, the Foreign Secretary's message to China.
I've had it, and I can so understand what other people have gone through.
The Prince of Wales on catching coronavirus and his determination to make sure the pandemic delivers change. Plus, we'll take a full look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in the press preview at 11:30.
Out there are still restrictions in place to prevent its spread, including people not gathering in groups of more than 6 people and staying 2 metres apart. But clearly that's not happening here.
People here felt they needed to come together to make their message loud and clear.
Look at us, we're in 2020 and this is what we're doing. We're having to walk and to march. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Save me!
George Floyd died in Minneapolis after a police officer put a knee on his neck for 8 minutes. It has parallels with Sean Rigg's death in Brixton in 2008 after being held face down for several minutes by police officers. Sean's sister Marcia says families of those who've died in custody have recently written asking to meet the Prime Minister.
To see that video on the TV was so traumatic for me because it just brought my experience back of Sean. It's like it happened yesterday. I want to meet him with Boris Johnson so I can speak on behalf of all the families that cannot do it. I'm here to do it for them because I know what it's like.
As the protest reached Downing Street, there were some scuffles and the police officer was punched in the face. Separately, a journalist was hit with a bottle on the head. But in Brixton there was a more peaceful moment of reflection. Firemen were among those paying tribute to the Black Lives Matter cause. One man's death has rekindled this movement around the world and shown that a pandemic can't stop protest. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, the Prime Minister said twice today that Black Lives Matter as he was questioned by MPs and our political editor over his response to the killing of George Floyd. Boris Johnson described the events in Minneapolis as inexcusable and said that racist violence had no place in society. Beth Rigby reports.
The Black Lives Matter movement's back in Westminster. The brutal killing of George Floyd has brought thousands of protesters to the gates of Downing Street, demanding to be heard. 100 metres away, but in another world, the Prime Minister leading the
I'm gonna go. This is the afternoon. It's like it's 2 o'clock now. Yes, I did sort of wake up fully now. I did wake up earlier, like 9, and 10. As you can see, this is when I fully woken up. Yeah, so I'm gonna have breakfast, brunch, lunch. Well, actually, I'll just say I'll have lunch. Okay, I'm gonna make lunch. And I'm gonna have a really quick shower, and then I'm gonna be on my way to Mama's. Yay!
Oh, so you're gonna miss it, Charlie? Yeah.
Never mind. I work on.
We had our
Got a new floor in. We've just got to see it. Let's see it inside. Oh, listen. But we always call it Shishadis. But they got a new flavour called Malteser with strawberry. Malteser and hey. I don't know either. There's Mummy. Matt, what did you get, Mum?
I got Snickers.
They're lovely. Hello. Oh, nice. Oh, cool. Oh, it has a list of what you have in here. So in the box they gave me like heels, but like a sandal one. I don't get on with. And they gave me a top I don't also get on with. But these are actually my own shoes. But they did give me a dress and hello. Look at that. Look how nice it is. I love these like little frills. And frills along here. I'll take those off actually. There we go. See? Oh, you like it? Mummy said you're a nice young lady. It's really nice. So there's ties here. You can stand to fill here. This tie over here. You know the jeans? I don't wear jeans because I have what's called child legs, so they're long, but I have a short torso, so these, they fit really nicely, really well. I can bend, fine, stretch. Very happy with these. Okay, so what happened is I found them on the internet and found them on the internet, and what they do is they give you like a questionnaire, and then they send you all these things in the box, and you say what you would like in your box and what you won't. And these are the shoes in here. So they're like black wedges. I don't like those. I don't get on well with open toe, because I have a wider foot. That's the top. It doesn't really suit me. Not really my style. And also this is a bit chunky, and I have enough bags. But no, everything else, the jeans and the dress, thumbs up, I want to keep. And all you have to do is just pay for what you want to keep. You only pay to sign up and everything, and you just pay for what you want, which will be in here, and you just send all this back in the box. Yeah. So here is the list of what they sent me, and I am keeping the rosy ruffle sleeve mini dress. And I am also keeping the leather jeans. Oh yeah, the Neil Ankle Razor skinny jeans. Really nice. So I'm so happy. So 2 out of 5 items. Woo!
In my mind, the 80s are all about excess.
So alright, mamas. We're now gonna watch the repair shop. Woohoo! Wear my new jeans. And new shoes too. I haven't finished lacing up this one. I've laced up that one, so look at that one. Look at that one. And here's the heel. One here as well. Off to the beach to eat pizza on the beach. Yeah. Warm and smelling delicious. Woo. Well, that's quite a nice picture actually. Pizza.
Deaths of almost 100 care workers could be investigated by the Health and Safety Executive. And we'll take a look at tomorrow's front pages in the press preview at 11:30.
Deaths attributed to other causes. And the stats show there were 13,000 extra non-COVID-19 deaths over this period. Of these, the biggest increase over the long-term average was in deaths attributed to dementia, up 52%. It's likely that these were care home residents whose lives were cut short by the virus, even if that wasn't reflected on their death certificate. And there's also been a big increase in deaths from causes such as asthma and diabetes. In mid-April, they spiked at 197% and 161% above average. And they were outside hospital, so it's likely to reflect a reluctance to seek medical attention during the epidemic. But a second report by the ONS shows the epidemic is tailing off. 53,000 people in England had the virus in their latest household survey. That's halved, down from 133,000 last week. In fact, the ONS says there is a steady fall now. More than 0.4% of the population were infected at the end of April. By the end of May, it was just 0.1%. Although there are still 5,500 people a day catching the virus. The latest estimate of the R number is 0.7 to 0.9, below the key threshold of 1, indicating that the spread of the virus is slowing. But these stats predate the easing of the lockdown earlier this week. We'll see in the coming days whether more social contact has increased spread of the virus.
And the pandemic is featuring in tomorrow's newspapers. There's the headline in The Guardian. World Health Organization advises over 60s to wear medical masks. We'll be taking another look at the front pages in our press preview at 11:30 with the Daily Mirror about the fall in unemployment figures. The US President said that the 46-year-old black man who died when a police officer knelt on his neck is hopefully looking down, saying this is a great thing. His presidential rival Joe Biden described the comments as despicable. Our US correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports from Minneapolis.
The division in America is clear right on Donald Trump's doorstep. A protest movement painting an uneasy portrait he's struggling to erase. But today he declared an unexpected victory, with unemployment dropping to 13.3%, surprising forecasters. And he couldn't resist bringing George Floyd's name into it.
Hopefully George is looking down right now and saying this is a great thing that's happening for our country. This is a great day for him. It's a great day for everybody.
It's a great day for him.
It's a great day for everybody. This is a great, great day. In terms
what is it to do with unemployment?
It's really what our Constitution requires, and it's what our country is all about.
Less than 24 hours after his memorial, those words sparked outrage in an increasingly fortified Washington. His political rival, Joe Biden, insists he's the man to lead the economy and soothe America's racial divisions. But his words are also being picked apart.
There are probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of people out there that are just not very good people.
That will sit uncomfortably with many Americans, and so will this. 2 officers in Buffalo shoving a 75-year-old protester. He sustained a head injury. They were suspended. Their entire emergency response unit resigned in support of them, their union claiming they were only executing orders.
When I saw the video, I got sick to my stomach. I think the city should pursue firing, and I think the district attorney should look at the situation for possible criminal charges.
This has been a week marked by discord and mourning, but little resolution about how to solve 2 things plaguing America: racism and police violence.
But now here in Minneapolis, there are some signs of change. A ban on chokeholds, and police officers will be required to report and intervene if they see an unauthorized use of force by another officer.
In a place that looks apocalyptic in places, that will be seen as progress. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Minneapolis.
German police are investigating whether the
there are people going around the crowd issuing people with so that's encouraging, but people clearly feel that they want to come out here to make their voices heard. We can try and speak to 1 or 2 protesters. Excuse me, do you mind if we ask you where you've come from, why you wanted to come here today?
I come from Lewisham in South London, and I've obviously watched the video of George Floyd, and I think the fact that that happened in broad daylight and really blatantly is just too much. It's too much. It's so obvious now, and I think that we have this similar problem in the UK. The police obviously aren't as violent, and we can do something. Well, they do things like that. But I'm a teacher. I think that there's no kind of history of colonialism being taught in schools. I know that black kids are 4 times more likely to be excluded from schools. I mean, it's kind of inherent everywhere in our society. So I think that the time is now, and this is just fantastic that everybody's come out, because actually it always gets pushed under the carpet, and I think...
it is an incredible turnout, but it is obviously in defiance of
the government's advice to stay at home, you think it's worth the risk?
I do think it's worth the risk. It's happened now. You know, well, what should, nobody's going to wait for 6 weeks or however long it is before we do, you know, it might be months and months. And I think, yeah, I think the feeling is here that everybody thinks that this is really too much, and so it has to be addressed. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for speaking to us. As I say, many thousands have turned out here, never seen this square and the surrounding streets right up to the Cenotaph on Whitehall as busy as this for a very long time. Lots of people determined to get their message across and to defy those warnings from the government to stay away from here.
Mark, thank you. Mark White there in Parliament Square. Astonishing pictures here from the helicopter above central London, and not only in London, these protests taking place across many cities in the UK and indeed across the world. So let's get an update on those Black Lives Matter protests from across the globe. First of all, in a major climb down overnight, the head of the NFL, that's the US's National Football League, bowed to player pressure and apologised for not listening to them over the Black Lives Matter protests. While no mention was made of Colin Kaepernick, the former quarterback, while a sign officially designated a section of the street Black Lives Matter Plaza was put up by city workers. In New York, protests continued into the night, with thousands marching despite an 8 p.m. curfew that had been put in place. And there were protests in cities elsewhere in the world, across Australia. This was Adelaide, where Australians were urged to walk alongside the Aboriginal community in a show of solidarity. That protest filled large parts of Victoria Square after police gave special permission for it to proceed, despite the COVID-19 restrictions. In other news, from June the 15th, all visitors and outpatients of hospitals in England will be required to wear face coverings, and all hospital staff will have to wear surgical masks. This was a new policy announced by the Health Secretary in yesterday's daily government briefing at 5 p.m. However, NHS trusts were not consulted about these changes, and it gives them just over a week to comply, according to NHS providers. England and the devolved nations of the UK. We've just had the NHS England numbers into us here at Sky News. They have stated that a further 75 people who tested positive for COVID-19 have died, and that brings the total number of confirmed reported deaths just in hospitals in England to 27,359. Those 75 patients were aged between 43 and 100 years old, and all of them had known underlying health conditions. Their families have been informed. There's a bit of a regional breakdown as well. We'll bring more on that later, but the total number of 75 people have tested positive, who tested positive for COVID-19 have died, and that brings the total number to 27,359.
It is raining a lot. Maybe if I zoom in you can see. There we go, you can see now. I zoomed in. We have a fitness class tomorrow morning. Are we going to go in the park? Hope not, but it's nice breeze. We went to fitness class at 8 in the morning this morning. Just had a shower, really good. Energized and refreshed, but also exhausted. Like, really takes you out here if you haven't done it for a long time. And wearing my fabulous new jeans. Wait, fabulous new jeans. There you go. So, things from Jeffree Star came. Ooh. Yay! Look at that! Yay! These are the stands. Ooh, I got a postcard as well. Lovely. Awesome. Fabulous. Okay, let me just look at the hand side. Let's get that. Yeah, there we are. Then the necklaces on, and there are two of them. Over here. Ooh, there we go. Ta-da! We've got the lipsticks over here. But let me just demonstrate with the Beauty Bay one. Well, obviously Jeffree Star's will fit. Oh no, Beauty Bay fits. There you go, see? Yay! Look at that! Yes! Look, another one! Yeah! So excited! We're not at Emma's house. It's very quiet because I'm the one. Yeah, all now is upstairs. Editing. Trying to get my head around this new software, so. But it's going okay. Just my uploading is really slow because of hand-ins and stuff, so. Oh, hang on, drinking tea. People are gonna judge me. Hang on. Here we go. I wish this was gin and tonic. Quite like green tea, to be honest. Oh, this is a great angle.
Financial crisis of 2008.
Oh right, when Lehman Brothers went bust and all that.
Oh.
The statue to this 17th century slave trader has stood for more than 120 years. It now lies at the bottom of the city's harbour. "10,000 gathered for the Black Lives Matter protest in Bristol, while George Floyd was killed nearly 4,000 miles away. The impact is felt just as strongly.
Why would I walk past that every day, knowing the history of it? That literally makes me feel like I don't matter. So that says Black Lives Matter.
I guess I was supposed to look at it as if he was some sort of hero, someone that was worthy of being immortalised. And I think that's actually, it sent a very, very strong message of white supremacy.
So I think it's difficult to know whether this is the start of something incredible. I mean, the statue being knocked down definitely is, but I think so much more needs to be done.
There is no escaping Edward Colston in Bristol. His name adorns buildings throughout the city. He has long been a key and controversial figure, with more than 11,000 having already signed a petition to remove his statue.
This is something that should have happened years ago, but the council failed to act. And even before I started the petition, there have been numerous groups campaigning for the removal of the statue, and rightly so, because Bristol is a multicultural and diverse city.
In the end, no petition was needed. There's no doubt that this is a very significant moment for Bristol. It is a city which has slavery ingrained in its history. The big question, though, is whether this is the start of something bigger. A police investigation into those responsible is now underway. The actions of a small minority here, condemned by the Home Secretary.
I think that is utterly disgraceful, and that speaks to the acts of disorder, public disorder, that actually have now become a distraction from the cause in which people are actually protesting about.
The question now is what next? Statues celebrating Britain's colonial past stand in cities across the country. There is now one less, as the Black Lives Matter movement continues to build momentum. Dan Whited, Sky News in Bristol.
Well, the Health Secretary told Sky News today there was undoubtedly a risk that this weekend's protests could lead to more cases of COVID-19. Thousands of protesters in London, though, were not put off, taking their message that Black Lives Matter to the gates of the American Embassy. Well, this evening, at least one police officer was injured in clashes with protesters, as our Home Affairs correspondent Mark White now reports.
They are the images organisers of this protest had desperately hoped to avoid. But for a second night, police officers under attack from an angry crowd around Whitehall. Running for cover as protesters threw bottles and other objects at them. As the officers headed under the arches in King Charles Street, reinforcements from the Met's Public Order Unit rushed in to hold the police line. At least one officer we saw suffered a head injury in the violence. As more reinforcements arrived, police began making some arrests before gaining control and holding off the crowd. These images will deeply worry police commanders and the Home Secretary, already incensed about the violence here just a day earlier.
I'm absolutely sickened and appalled by the level of violence that was on display. Police officers were abused and police officers were injured, and we have a police officer that is seriously injured and in hospital right now, and that is absolutely unacceptable.
Black Lives Matter! This will be deeply disappointing for the many thousands of peaceful demonstrators who turned up en masse outside the US Embassy earlier in the day. Determined their message, one of peaceful protest, would be the abiding image.
We were slightly concerned, but this is how we felt after being oppressed for such a long time. So the feeling of anger, it is there. So I do understand, but it is not just.
2 weeks after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, the passion and sense of injustice is still profound. Government ministers, police and health officials had urged people to stay at home because of the ongoing coronavirus health emergency. The huge turnout, an act of defiance from these protesters who said the issue was just too important to stay at home.
When we walk into a shop, when we walk anywhere else, if we're with our friends that are black, they just get pressed straight away. You can see they get judged. And it's not fair. It's not how society should be. We should all be in one. We should be in one harmony.
As darkness descended on Whitehall, more serious violence as an angry crowd confronted public order police officers. The Prime Minister has said people have a right to protest peacefully, but they have no right to attack the police. These demonstrations, he said, had been subverted by thuggery.
Well, Mark can join us now in Westminster. And Mark, the Prime Minister has said tonight that these demonstrations have been subverted by thuggery. What's the situation now as the police try to move on this hardcore of demonstrators?
Well, this serious disorder is continuing into the night. We have 3 pockets of disorder. One here, we're about half a mile from Westminster, Rochester Row. We'll let you look at the police lines. We've been following the police as they've been chasing groups of protesters out of the area, trying to disperse them. There's another pocket of serious disorder on Westminster Bridge. You can see now this is the tactic that we've really followed for about the last 20 minutes or so as the police run forward. The protesters in front, probably about 50 or so, they've been setting wheelie bins and other items alight, throwing objects at the police. I mentioned 3 areas of disorder. There's another area of disorder on Whitehall, just down from Downing Street as well. So some very significant issues for the Metropolitan Police to deal with as they try to break up these groups of demonstrators. This one now, just 50 strong. It's not a big group, but they are violent. They've been violent towards the police, and as I say, setting bins and the like on fire. We also saw clashes between the police and demonstrators on Westminster Bridge, with bottles being thrown at them there as well. The police are here in numbers. They have the numbers to contain them, but at the moment it is a
run around the central Westminster area as they try to disperse the protesters who don't seem to want to go anywhere. More bottles coming over at us now from the crowd. So police telling us to be careful. Obviously, we're not wearing the same kind of protective clothing that they have, but the protesters now further down this street, just past this bus. It doesn't look like the bus was attacked by the protesters from what I can see. He's got his hazards on, just waiting there with a couple of passengers inside. So continuing disorder in central London this evening. Okay, Mark, many thanks for now. We'll keep an eye on those pictures, of course, as the evening continues. And the protests are featuring in tomorrow's papers. Here's the headline in the Mirror, the March for Change. We'll be taking a first look at the front pages in the press preview at 10:30. I'll be joined tonight